The shuttle pierced Earth's atmosphere like a whisper through storm clouds, its sleek obsidian hull gleaming against the blue sky. Inside, the cadets sat in unnerving silence, their eyes fixed forward, posture rigid. For some, this was the first time setting foot on a Category 4 aggressor-class planet. For others, merely the first time facing the species known across the Galactic Council in equal parts awe and caution: humans. Lieutenant Vectil of the Ilari delegation adjusted the translator node along the ridge of his neck, the faint flicker of cyan light tracing his opalescent skin. He surveyed his fellow cadets, 6 in total, drawn from 6 different species, none of which had ever waged war on the scale humanity had. Across from him, Kale of the Ursidans flexed his clawed digits nervously. Even his kind, a species engineered for sub-zero survival and defense, had never faced a culture born in fire and shaped by relentless conflict. "Why are we even here?" muttered Syrah, the Zalarian path, her voice like wind chimes dulled by dust. What could these primitives possibly teach us? Vectil didn't answer. He was wondering the same thing. The shuttle settled onto the landing platform with a low hum. Through the reinforced viewport, they glimpsed the Academy's sprawl, concrete and steel, hard lines and utilitarian symmetry, all built to endure rather than impress. No flowing towers, no bio-integrated structures, nothing like the elegant cities of the Galactic Core. This place looked like it expected to be bombed, then bombed again. A human officer was waiting at the platform edge, broad-shouldered, sun-darkened, with eyes that didn't quite match the forced smile on his face. His uniform was crisp, but his stance suggested experience more than ceremony. "Welcome to Earth," he said. "I'm Sergeant Marcus Hale. You can call me Sergeant or Sir. Anything else, and I assume you want extra PT." The translator nodes clicked to life, spitting out perfectly timed equivalents in 6 languages. A few cadets blinked. One, Vesh of the Trinal Cluster, recoiled slightly at Hale's tone. It sounded too much like a challenge. The group was herded into formation with surprising ease. Hale walked among them, inspecting, observing. Not like a diplomat or tour guide. Like a predator taking stock. "I know what you've heard," he said as they entered the Academy's central courtyard. "That humans are unstable, violent, reckless. You wouldn't be wrong. We are. But we're also alive, and we intend to stay that way." No one responded. The courtyard bore scars, cracks in the stone where training drones had missed their targets, burn marks from plasma drills, even a collapsed wall being replaced by manual labor. This place isn't for tourists. You're here because your governments asked for understanding, cooperation, maybe even trust. Well, understanding has a price. So before you start your orientation, I want you to see something. They were led through a narrow hallway into a chamber far below the Academy surface. The walls grew darker, colder. The lights dimmed as they descended, until the only sound was their footfalls and the distant thrum of buried machinery. When the chamber doors opened, the temperature dropped noticeably. The air was heavy. "This," Hale said, "is the War Archive." The room was massive, wider than the shuttle bay, and filled with floating holoscreens arranged in concentric rings. As they entered, the lights flared to life, casting stark reflections on the cadets' faces. Some screens displayed still images, a field littered with bodies and mud, a skyline consumed by fire, a child holding a shattered toy, standing before a crater where her home once was. Others played footage on loop. Soldiers charging through gunfire, tanks rolling over rubble, missiles launching in deafening arcs. Vectil's eyes narrowed. It was not simulation. This was real. History unfiltered. "Each of you comes from cultures with philosophies of peace, of order," Hale continued, walking slowly between the screens. "Some of you have never fought a war. Some don't even have words for it. But Earth? We didn't just fight wars. We evolved through them. We lost millions, then billions. We invented weapons we couldn't comprehend, then used them anyway." A screen flickered beside them. Black and white footage of a city swallowed in a rising mushroom cloud. "This was 1945, Hale said, pausing to let the date settle. "We've been trying to make sure it never happens again ever since." Kale's fur bristled. Why show us this? To terrify us? To boast? No, Hale said, locking eyes with the Ursidan. To prepare you. The room fell silent. Screens continued to whisper tragedy into the air. There's a lecture scheduled in 20 minutes, Hale said, turning away. You'll want to attend. It's not optional. But what you see next, that's on you. This room is open. Watch what you can stomach. Then ask yourselves if you still think humans are simple. With that, he left. The cadets stood in silence, alone amid the echoes of human destruction. Vektil turned slowly, eyes scanning the room. His throat felt dry, a purely psychosomatic response. His kind didn't require moisture in the same way, but the pressure in his chest was unmistakable. A screen flicked to life before him. Grainy footage of a young soldier, bloodied and exhausted, cradling a fallen comrade in a bombed-out street. I was 19, the soldier said, staring into the lens. He was 17. I don't remember why we were fighting by then. Just that if we stopped, we'd die. So we didn't stop. Sira stumbled back, gasping. Her hand flew to her chest as if to slow her racing hearts. They're broken. No, Vektil murmured, his voice quiet. They're still standing. The others were watching now. No one spoke. The room didn't require commentary, only comprehension. After several minutes, Kale growled, a low, conflicted sound. If this is how they treat their own, how do they treat enemies? No one answered. But the silence said enough. Vektil's gaze lingered on a final screen as it began to play. A mass of civilians shielding each other during a bombing raid. Strangers clinging to strangers, covering children with their bodies. The screen went black. There was no conclusion, no narrator, just silence, and the understanding that this was only the beginning. And still, the door to the lecture hall remained open, waiting. The lecture hall was nothing like the rest of the academy. It was stark, quiet, and buried deep beneath the surface, where daylight couldn't intrude. The walls were matte black, the air still. The only light came from the panoramic screen at the front, currently dormant, and the soft glow from the control console, where Sergeant Hale stood, arms crossed, watching the cadets file in with unreadable eyes. Vektil took a seat near the center, posture rigid, wings tucked tightly against his back. Around him, the others settled with cautious hesitance. Sira sat furthest from the screen, flanked by Vesh and Kale, as though distance might blunt whatever horrors awaited. Their earlier confidence had evaporated, leaving only a tension that clung to the air like the static before a storm. Hale didn't speak right away. He waited, not out of hesitation, but calculation, giving them space to feel the unease settle into their bones. When he finally stepped forward, his voice was quiet, even. You saw fragments in the war archive. What follows is context. With a flick of his hand, the screen awakened. The darkness scattered into bursts of flame and chaos. A battlefield emerged, muddy trenches, shattered trees, and human soldiers waist-deep in filth. Explosions punctuated the silence. Screams filled the room, not dramatized, not edited. Real. This is from the First World War. Earth year 1917. The camera panned across young faces caked in mud and terror. Shells thundered overhead. Gas crept low over the ground, and soldiers clutched makeshift masks to their faces, eyes wild with the knowledge of what would happen if they failed. Vesh shifted in his seat. They fought like this? In the open. With whatever they had, Hale said. Sometimes just shovels. Or fists. The footage shifted. Bodies stacked in carts, men limping, blinded, burned. And yet, through the carnage, there were glimpses of impossible endurance. Soldiers pulling comrades from craters, sharing the last of their water, singing in the trenches before an inevitable push toward enemy lines. The room felt colder. Sira's hands trembled, and she whispered, "Why didn't they stop?" "They couldn't," Vektil murmured, eyes fixed on the screen. It wasn't a matter of choice. The scene dissolved into white. A new era bled into view. This time, the horrors had evolved. World War II. Cities reduced to rubble. Holocaust victims behind barbed wire. Soldiers storming beaches under hails of gunfire. Flames rose over Dresden, then Tokyo. Children sobbed beside the ruins of their homes. The crescendo came with a familiar, gut-churning mushroom cloud. Hale's voice remained unchanged. 70 million dead. In 6 years. No one moved. Even Cale's ever-alert form sagged slightly, as if the weight of the truth had settled into his massive shoulders. The screen faded to black again. Then, suddenly, color. Modern warfare. Drones buzzed over deserts, targeting figures below with clinical precision. Footage from helmet cams showed urban combat in cramped alleys, gunfire echoing in the tight spaces. Soldiers kicked down doors, eyes scanning, breaths shallow. This time, the faces were different. Older, colder, still afraid, but trained to hide it. "You're watching battles from the 21st and 22nd centuries," Hale said. "Advances in tactics, in weapons, in surveillance." The violence became faster, more efficient. But the grief stayed the same. One video zoomed in on a soldier cradling a lifeless body. The screen didn't clarify who it was: comrade, sibling, civilian. It didn't need to. "I don't understand," Cale growled, his voice a low rumble of restrained confusion. "With this level of destruction, how are you not extinct?" "We almost were," Hale replied. More than once. The footage shifted again. This time, soldiers delivering aid to bombed villages, carrying wounded civilians, sharing rations with orphans. Human hands, stained with war, offering warmth. "There is savagery," Hale continued. "But there is also sacrifice, compassion. The very people who pull the trigger are the ones who drag the wounded out of the fire." Sarah stood suddenly. Her voice cracked as she said, "You call that compassion? You built weapons to erase cities, then cry over the ashes." She turned toward the exit, breath short, and Vesh moved to follow her. But Vektil remained seated, his gaze distant. "They didn't cry because it was easy," he said softly. "They cried because they did it anyway." Hale didn't respond. He stepped back, letting the silence swell again. Then came the last segment, a compilation of human testimonies. Veterans from different eras, their voices overlaying grainy clips of conflict and camaraderie. "I held the line because the guy next to me needed me too. I hated every second. But I'd do it again to keep my people safe. We fought monsters, and sometimes we were the monsters." When the screen went dark at last, the hall felt cavernous. No one spoke. No one moved. "This is what we are," Hale said. "Not heroes. Not villains. Just survivors. You wanted to understand us. Now you begin to." He turned and left, leaving the cadets in the dim afterglow of history. Vektil exhaled slowly. His hands, steady before, now shook. The others sat in stunned quiet, each haunted by different memories. Cale's claws dug shallow furrows into the seat's armrest. Vesh stared at the wall, eyes glassy. Even Syrah, though standing by the exit, had not left. She stood frozen, back to the room, shoulders taut. For a long while, no one said a word. Finally, Cale broke the silence, voice low. "This changes everything." Vektil nodded. "Yes. But the question is, what does it change into?" No one answered. And still, the war echoes remained, quiet now, but unforgettable. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm of drills, lectures, and simulated exercises. Yet, beneath the surface structure, something fundamental had shifted. The cadets moved through their routines with a quiet solemnity, glancing more often at the human soldiers who trained beside them, not with suspicion, but with wary fascination. The humans laughed in the mess hall, jogged until their lungs burned, argued fiercely during tactic sessions, and fought in the simulators like creatures who had nothing left to lose. Vektil had watched them closely, compiling patterns, nuances, contradictions. There was a strange elegance to their chaos, a kind of brutal harmony he couldn't reduce to statistics. No tactical overlay or probability matrix could capture the way one human would throw themselves in front of a blast shield for a stranger, or how they joked minutes before launching into simulated death zones. On the third day, Sergeant Hale called them to the Obsidian Range, a combat training field meant for extreme simulations. The ground was scorched, terrain uneven. littered with debris meant to replicate a city ruined by sustained artillery. The sky above flickered with artificial smoke clouds. "Today," Hale said, "you fight." The cadets stood in a rough half-circle, armor fitted, weapons slung. Across from them, 6 human trainees waited. They looked younger than Hale, lean and marked by scars that told stories no report would ever contain. Their eyes met those of the alien cadets with quiet resolve, not challenge, but certainty. "This is non-lethal simulation," Hale continued. "Stun rounds, sensory shocks only. But your pain will be real, as will your choices." The mission was simple: retrieve an object at the center of the field, extract to the far side. What wasn't said, what didn't need to be said, was that the humans would do everything in their power to stop them. The horn blared. The cadets moved. Vectil darted left, wings tucked, vision filters active. Syrah followed, her movement quick but hesitant. Vesh and Kale took the center, the former relying on reflex, the latter on sheer mass. The first stun round cracked the air like a whip. Vesh dropped immediately, twitching as the shock incapacitated his nervous system. Syrah screamed his name, veering toward him. "Keep moving." Vectil shouted, grabbing her arm. "He's out." "We're not." Kale roared, barreling through a concrete barrier, forcing the human squad into retreat. But they moved with practiced precision, disappearing into cover, flanking in silence. Within moments, Kale was surrounded. A smoke canister landed at his feet. The detonation blinded everything for 5 seconds. When the haze cleared, Kale was flat on his back, 2 red markers blinking on his armor. Vectil pulled Syrah behind cover, heart pounding. "They're coordinated," he said. "They anticipate our behavior. Not just tactically, they understand how we think." Syrah stared at him, eyes wide with panic. "This isn't a training exercise. It's humiliation." "No," he said, breathing hard. "It's a lesson." They moved again, low and fast, angling toward the objective. A metal case, blinking slowly amid the rubble. Vectil reached it first, fingers brushing against the surface. A crack of simulated gunfire split the air. A jolt ran through his arm. He dropped to one knee, vision flickering. A human stepped from cover, tall, grim, rifle raised. She didn't fire again. Vectil stared at her. "Why didn't you finish me?" She tilted her head slightly. "You were reaching for the wrong case." He blinked. There, several meters behind the false objective, was another case, identical in form, but flashing a different pattern. Decoy. The human lowered her weapon. "You're smart. You'll figure it out." Then she vanished into the smoke. He stared after her, mind racing. The objective wasn't the goal. The simulation was layered. Psychological. The real test wasn't who could win. It was who could adapt. When the round ended, no victor declared, only a tally of incapacitations. Hale walked among them with slow, measured steps. "You failed," he said bluntly. "Not because you weren't fast. Not because you weren't strong. You failed because you fought like cadets, not survivors." Vectil clenched his jaw. The sting of the hit was fading, but Hale's words burned deeper. "In real war," Hale continued, "you're never given all the variables. Your enemy doesn't follow rules. There is no fairness, only outcome." Kale stood, brushing off dust and frustration. "Then why pretend this is training?" "It's not pretending," Hale replied. "It's preparing. You were taught to avoid chaos. We were born from it." Syrah stepped forward, voice brittle. "Why do you keep saying that? That you were shaped by violence. That it defines you. How can you live like that?" Hale met her eyes. "Not unkindly. Because we had no other choice. And eventually, we stopped expecting one." The silence that followed felt like a verdict. That night, Vectil sat alone in the dormitory's upper observation room, staring out at the dark horizon. Earth's moon hung heavy in the sky, scarred, cratered, yet beautiful. There was something poetic in it, he thought. A world marked by violence, yet still luminous. He thought of the human who hadn't pulled the trigger, of her eyes. Calm, calculating, not out of cruelty, out of comprehension. Behind him, footsteps. Syrah approached, wrapped in a borrowed thermal cloak. You're still trying to understand them, she said, voice soft. I have to. Why? Vectil looked at the stars. Because I think the rest of the galaxy has been asking the wrong question. She tilted her head. We keep asking how humans survived their history. We should be asking what they became because of it. She said nothing, and he didn't need her to. Below them, the next training alert sounded. More simulations. More hard truths. But this time, none of the cadets hesitated. The shuttle trembled as it broke atmosphere, a guttural hum rattling through the seats and hull. The cadets sat strapped into the bay, their eyes forward, silent. Gone were the restless movements, the nervous chatter. They had been tempered, not in ceremony, but in challenge. This wasn't another simulation. This was deployment. Vectil adjusted the harness across his chest, gaze flicking to the mission briefing display. Civilian extraction in the Sagan Fringe. A colony caught between rival warlords. Not a declared war zone, just chaos, the kind that humans seemed uniquely equipped to handle. The kind the cadets now had to face alongside them. Across from him sat Corporal Reyes, the same human who had spared him during the Obsidian Range exercise. Her armor bore the marks of real campaigns, scratches, faded unit insignia, a small blue ribbon tucked into a panel near her shoulder. She didn't speak either, but when their eyes met, there was an understanding between them. No animosity, just recognition. Syrah sat beside Vectil, her fingers wrapped tightly around the edge of her seat. Her earlier doubts had hardened into something else, not resignation, but resolve. She didn't flinch when the shuttle banked hard. She didn't speak when the green light activated above them. Descent complete. Time to move. The ramp dropped, and heat rolled into the bay, thick, choking, heavy with the scent of ash and melted stone. The colony lay in ruin. Blackened skeletons of buildings clawed at the sky. Smoke curled like fingers through the craters. The only light came from burning debris and distant tracer fire. Contact expected in all sectors, Reyes said, stepping forward with practiced ease. Civilians are pinned in the comms tower. We extract them, we leave. Fast and clean. She gestured to her squad and the cadets. Pair off. No solos. Vectil found himself moving without hesitation, falling into step beside Reyes. Syrah joined a lean medic from the human team. Kale and Vesh flanked the rear, silent shadows behind two human scouts. The mission began with movement, quiet, deliberate, a dance through collapsed structures and narrow alleys. Reyes signaled with hand gestures, never wasting breath. Vectil mirrored her, his mind split between observation and intuition. Then came the first sound, an infant's cry, shrill and sudden. Not in the tower. Too close. Reyes froze. Civilian. She turned to Vectil. Check it. Fast. He nodded and peeled off, weaving through the wreckage. The cry came again, clearer now. Behind a fractured wall, beneath a slab of concrete, he saw her, a small human child, no older than 4, curled beside the body of a woman. Dead. The child blinked at him, lips trembling. She didn't scream. She didn't move. I found one, he whispered into the comms. Too far from evac zone, came Reyes' voice. Bring her if you can. Fast. He slid the slab aside, careful not to startle the girl. She flinched, but didn't run. When he extended his hand, she hesitated, then reached for him. He lifted her carefully, pressing her close against the armor plate on his chest. Her heartbeat was rapid, fluttering like a trapped insect. And yet, she clung to him. Gunfire erupted ahead. Close. Move. Reyes barked. They broke into a sprint, the girl shielded in Vectil's arms. Ahead, the tower came into view, pocked by explosions, but intact. Human and alien cadets laid down suppressing fire, while Reyes led the civilians out in a tight line. They moved slowly, elderly, injured, terrified. Not fast enough. Something moved in the smoke. A figure stepped from the shadows, armored in scavenged plating, eyes cold with mercenary resolve. He raised a weapon, a long-barrel energy rifle aimed at the retreating civilians. Reyes didn't shout. She didn't hesitate. She moved. Straight into the path of the shot. The blast struck her square in the shoulder, spinning her to the ground. Blood bloomed across the dust. The civilian screamed. The rifleman raised his weapon again. Vektil didn't think. He set the child behind a fallen girder and stood, drawing his sidearm. He wasn't fast enough to match human reflexes. But the angle was perfect. His shot landed square in the mercenary's chest, knocking him off his feet. Reyes groaned on the ground, trying to rise. "Stay down," he said, kneeling beside her. "You protected them." She coughed, smiling through gritted teeth. "We always do." Behind them, the last of the civilians were loaded into the backup shuttle. Kale dragged 2 more to safety. Syrah sprinted through the smoke, face streaked with grime, eyes wide. "She's alive," Vektil called. "But we need extraction." By the time they lifted off, Reyes had been stabilized, the civilian secured, and the girl nestled quietly in Syrah's lap. She hadn't cried again. Back in orbit, after the debriefing, after the medical scans, after the exhausted silence settled over the barracks, Vektil stood alone in the observation deck once more. This time, he wasn't looking at the stars. He watched Earth. He saw the clouds swirl over its blue surface, the continents outlined in shadow and light. He thought about the girl, about Reyes, about the mercenary who didn't hesitate to shoot a child to make a point. He thought about war. Syrah joined him again, quiet as before. "You're not the same," she said. "No," he replied. "None of us are." The door slid open behind them. Reyes stepped in, arm in a sling, smirk barely contained. "You did good down there," she said, voice rasped by pain and pride. Vektil turned. "You did better." Reyes shook her head. "We did what had to be done." A beat of silence passed between them, heavy but not burdened. And for the first time, Vektil realized the truth of it, not just about humans, but about himself. War had shaped them, scars and all. But what they chose to protect, that's what defined them. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.